Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Bulletproof Hygiene podcast. I am excited to say that this is our 70th episode. So thank you for joining us. We're really excited about it. And we have something super special for the 70th. Of course, we have kept a really great secret for a while now, and I can't believe we have not shared her sooner, but we are welcoming Erika Pusillo to our show today. And
Hey.
hi, thank you for joining us. We're so excited to have you. Erika is actually a huge part of our Bulletproof team. She leads the team tracks at our summit and the team mastermind. She is the practice director at Spodak Dental Group. And I am so inspired by Erika's story and her passion for what she does. And this is going to be a wealth of knowledge and information. So I'm so glad you guys are joining us today. But Erika really does have this extraordinary, inspirational story of her journey to becoming the practice director. And I think it's really impactful and inspirational for any listener, whether you're in dentistry or not. But for those of us who really understand the intricacies of the dental world and the different roles within the practice, it's especially encouraging and insightful. And I've had the opportunity to speak with many hygienists throughout my career, and I often hear that so many hygienists feel handcuffed within their practices. They feel like they don't have the authority or autonomy to practice at their full potential, and it's a really frustrating place to be. And I love your story, Erika, because you broke through so many barriers to get where you are today. So without further ado, I want to welcome Erika Pusillo, and would you please share all your gems and journey and story with us?
Yes, absolutely. And thanks for that introduction. We talk about journeys and stories. We all have one, and it's not something that many of us publicly share. And I think that one of the reasons why I decided to share my story, my journey, is that I wanted to relate more to people when I speak, or when we do casts, or when we do, some of the tracks at the summits, because so often when I have been that person in CE courses and I see the speaker, I kind of assume that this person has it put together, that their life is amazing, their practice is perfect, it's utopia, and life is amazing. Like birds are coming around and fixing their hair, and awesomeness, red carpets rolled out. And it's just not reality. And especially even for the speakers that we see, we're only seeing the apex. We're seeing them standing on the summit, and we don't see how hard the climb was, and the setbacks and the failures, and what it was to struggle and then overcome to get to where they are. And I wanted to tell that story because I don't want anyone to believe that what their past was is or is currently is an indicator of what their future has to be. And I think that a lot of times we struggle with this belief of, I'm not worthy because of X, Y, and Z, because of my family, because of my history. And I struggled with that too, not feeling worthy, not feeling, what is my kind of street cred, for being able to share and to speak to other people when I don't have a formal degree, or, when I'm not a doctor and, I'm not a formally trained consultant or speaker. What is my authority, my validity in doing that? And so that's why I shared that story. And so I started out in dentistry 13 years ago, and I went to a dental assisting school. I did not choose dentistry. It chose me. My mom is in dentistry. She started out as a dental assistant. Very early on in my career, my family, they got a divorce, and it was during a transitional time for me. It was in middle school. And that's hard because I'm kind of finding my way as a human being, and then to experience the traumas of that divorce, and then the uncertainty in the home. Financially, there were a lot of struggles, and then kind of having something that was so consistent and known, and having that shattered at that young age, and also dealing with the awkwardness. Thank God there was no social media at that time, but yeah, bullying, and people that, I have got curly hair, which I love now, but you know what? It was a frizzy mess. I used to brush this out, okay, before I knew how to take care of this in middle school. So you can imagine taking this hair and brushing it, how that would look. was not good. Like I was not the popular kid by any way, like mean, shape, and form. I'm also an introvert, like just naturally. So I love to observe more than I like to participate. So I like to be around people, but I like to be the one like watching you guys hang out, right? The creepy one that's like, you know, watching the reality TV show. That's me. I like to listen. And so you can imagine, yes, creepy hair in my face over here, like observing what everybody else is doing. Not a fun time. But you know, so I had those insecurities. I had, you know, those self-limiting beliefs. And, you know, I came from a family that really struggled financially, even all throughout it. My dad worked 7 days a week. My mom was a stay-at-home mom because it was more expensive to have 3 kids in daycare than what she was bringing home as a waitress at that time. So my parents got divorced. She then went back to school. She went to dental assisting school. And at nighttime, she worked at Publix in the deli. So I didn't see much of my mom during that time when she was trying to build her career. And what I didn't realize at that time, you know, when you're a kid, you look to your parents as that model. Like they are the people that are teaching you how to do life. And, you know, yes, it was uncertain, it was hard, and it was troubling for me. But what I was also observing and witnessing throughout that was just the strength that my mom had. Like looking back at it and saying, whoa, she decided to go to school at that age, you know?
Yeah.
She was in her mid-30s at that time, go back to school because she wanted to have a career. And then to say she had 3 kids, we all primarily lived with her. Going to school, she'd come home, we'd see her for just very, you know, an hour or so, and then she would go and she'd work in the deli and repeat, you know, and she wouldn't get home till 11:30, we were in bed. And the sacrifices she had to make to be able to better provide for us is, I think, part of some of the drive that I had to overcome some of those challenges, you know, that I've had to face. And so I'm grateful for those experiences. I'm definitely a little bit more on the optimist side where, yes, you know, I have those challenges, and in the moments, like, you know, I'm crying, I'm upset in the challenge, I'm mad, and whatever it is, but I try to look back and say, what are these lessons that I've learned? And that was definitely a key one. And so some of my advice, like if you've had that troubling past or childhood, take a moment and think about what came of that. Was there any lesson at least that was learned, or positivity that, and maybe it was, hey, I had this past and the lesson was don't follow in those footsteps. Right. And that encouraged you to take a different path. And so it's just, the healing is in the acceptance of what happened. We can't change it, but what can we do with that information and experience to propel us forward? And so I went to Florida State University. It was the first person in my family to go to college. No one really knew how to do it and the processes. I just kind of figured it out. And you know, it got really tough. Again, I had to support myself. They didn't have the money to send me there. I had to get scholarships. I had a job, you know, and then I had school. And then I started getting in my own head, you know, can I handle this? Is this for me? I felt like at that time I didn't have anybody to talk to that knew what I was going through. And so I kept it inside instead of talking it through. I decided to withdraw from school. So I did not graduate from Florida State University. For a really long time, I felt like a failure. I felt, again, the unworthiness conversation, you know, not good enough, all those things that come along with, hey, all these other people were able to make it and I wasn't.
Right. I just want to point out really quick that I'm assuming that all of that was in your own head. That was not coming from any external place, right? That was kind of the reel that was playing in your mind.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Partly, it was partly, and you know, I haven't shared this part actually. So you asked me now, I'm going to share. Yeah, a lot of it was in my head. However, my mom and dad, and again, during that time when I was in college, even though they've been divorced for many years, they still did not have a good relationship. Right. And, you know, and a lot of times it was a conflict between what one parent believed was best and the other saying, well, this is the opposite. And my mom would call me and tell me about those conversations for whatever reason she thought would be a good idea, not realizing some of the damage that would come because of it, or at least the way I took it. And so she would tell me things that my dad was saying, you know, about me, like, you know, I don't have any common sense, or, you know, I never should have gone to a 4-year, you know, university. See, here's the tears coming out.
So that's interesting, because that was almost compounding what you had going on in your head on top of that. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
It was almost like validation.
Yeah.
So when someone that's that close to you is basically validating that negative self-talk in your head,
yeah,
you almost then say, it is me.
Yeah. Like, it makes it more believable. Yeah. Even though it's not the truth, it almost solidifies that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, that's a hard space, but, so yeah, went through that. And, you know, withdrew from school, moved back home, and my mom was like, hey, you know, dentistry is a great career path. My mom opened her own dental assisting school a few years back, and she was a dental assistant, became a dental office manager, opened up her own dental assisting school. And she said, you know, why don't you do that and then go on to dental hygiene school? And I was like, okay, I'll do that. It was a Saturday 8-week course, Saturday a month, every Saturday for a couple months. And so I did it, and, you know, it wasn't something that I was like, oh, like, love it, you know, at first. And I was getting ready to apply to dental hygiene school at Palm Beach State, and found out that I was pregnant with my now husband, but he was my boyfriend at the time. And that was 11 years ago. So the hygiene school kind of, if I'm not going to do it all out, I'm not going to do it at all. And there's a pro and a con to that, right? Like I'm a perfectionist too. So I'm like, I'm not going to even start if I can't do it well. So I stuck with the dental assisting, and I didn't realize how much I would love it until I actually got into doing that. So I started at my practice. It was the first sterilization assistant that we had. I did sterilization for a couple of weeks. I also came from a family that really had hard work ethics. And so all I knew is that if there's something you want in life, no one's going to give it to you. Like, no one looks out for you but you.
Right.
And, you know, no one has ownership over your life. And then no one can want something more for yourself than you want it for yourself. They won't. Like, basically, like, as dark as it sounds, is like, you're a lone wolf, so you get what you give. And so that was it. And when I was in sterilization, and this was a new position, I'm kind of like, well, what am I doing? Sometimes I'd finish like wrapping the instruments, and I'd be like, what the heck do I do next? And I was always like, you know, asking people, what else can I do? How can I help you? Where can I go? What can I organize? What can I clean? And then when people would be like, I don't know, you know, or everything's caught up, then I would start saying, okay, well, I don't want to stand around. I feel inauthentic making money, not participating or doing something. So I started then saying, let me do something where I believe I could add value. And so it was either reorganizing, deep cleaning things, learning, shadowing the assistants in their positions. Part of that learning was setups. You know, they vary by doctor. And so I would say, hey, I'm going to set up for your next patient. It added value to them because it kept them on time for their schedule, but it added value to me because I was learning how to be better prepared if I were to get that opportunity to assist, to know what the setups were and did I do it right, or did I miss something? I came in early a lot and did that learning as well. And then when we talk about barriers, putting that, you know, so I had myself imposed, like, yes, I was driven to want to learn and to do more. I think it's just kind of in me. But I also had that, like, you're a failure, something's going to go wrong. Like, you know, what if people, how would they judge me if they knew I dropped out of college? And how would they judge me if they knew I could have been more, you know? And I felt like if I didn't have that degree or higher degree, like I had failed in life, you know, I was not ever going to be successful or make a big difference. And for me at that time, I felt like in order to make a big difference, you had to have a big role.
Got
you
it.
know, and as I've learned is that for the people that have made the biggest differences, and you think of the biggest names, they start with the smallest of gestures in their community, in their towns, in their homes. And it's on the one-to-one level that then creates that change, because you work so much, you amplify what you can do with your own hands through the work of other people.
Right.
And that starts in the one-on-one level.
Right.
But I didn't know that, you know, then and on that time. So I was totally like feeling sorry for myself. Lack of a better word, that was what it was. So yeah, I got, then a few weeks later, I got the opportunity to be a dental assistant with Dr. Miles Spodak. And when we jumped in there, I was like, okay, I went to dental assisting school, but I learned something like one time ever, right? And then we moved on to the next.
Right.
So we walk into that room and I was like a deer in headlights. And so again, so he's sitting there and I'm almost in my head like, okay, what do I do next? And he's talking to the patient. And we know when we talk to the patient, we just kind of listen and observe on what's happening. Well, I was like, I don't want him to think that I'm not working or not doing anything. So I would hold a 2x2 in my hand, like just in case he would decide like he needed like his mirror wiped or like something with like saliva. I don't even know. And so there was one time after me doing this like several times for patients, he looked up at me and he goes, Erika, I'm not going to need that. I'm like, and he was like, I'm not going to need that. I'm like, okay, I'm going to put this down. Cause he probably was like, that's so creepy. Like, stop. So anyways, it was funny, but I did have people in that when I joined Spodak Dental, it was so different. We had a really, really small team at the time. And this was really starting the, transformation that Dr. Craig wanted to have for his own practice. And so the team at the time, I think more represented what an average office team and culture would be. And that's if you bring in somebody new, you met them for the very first time in the first day, you had no ability to meet or no say in who was hired and brought onto the team. And then what that does to the team is they kind of resent that new person, like, hey, you're just bringing in this new family member and I don't like them because I didn't have the opportunity to even decide if I wanted them. So I wasn't liked just for that. I went and ate my lunch in the car most days. You know, the office manager at the time, she would tell me that she was like a health nut, that I kid you not, like, this is so wrong. And like, so against everything we know about HR, but I didn't know at the time. But, you know, she was like, we don't eat unhealthy here. So if you decide to have something unhealthy, like you can't eat it in this building. Like,
what?
Yeah. And so I'm literally like, here I am, like, you know, like early 20s, like, oh my, okay. You know? Yeah, I remember when some team members would come in early for me and you know, help me out. I would do like little things. I would bring them little things. Like I knew some of them liked the dark chocolate peanut M&Ms, and I'd bring them a little bag or something like that. And I remember getting called in her office and her being like, yeah, no, you cannot bring in candy. You can't do the unhealthy thing. And I was just like, I can't win with this lady. Like, instead of focusing on like, wow, thanks for coming in off the clock on your own time to learn, train to be better. It was more of like, don't do that thing. And so where I'm getting with this is that, you know, your typical, again, that office culture a lot of times is just so focused on putting out the fires or on the things of what not to do. And we tend to miss all of the great things that are happening, which are oftentimes 2 to 3 to 4 times to 1, the ratio of the things that need to be improved. And so what I learned from that experience is what not to do if I were ever in that position, because it really is easy to do, especially when you're busy and you have a limited time, you know, in your day, is to constantly be like, don't do that, fix this, correct that, you know, go over here, and not focus on the special things that are happening in the practices. And so
I think that's a really good point. And I want to just pause for a second, because you said you learned that for if you were ever in that position. And I want to make the point that, you know, not all of us are aspiring to be a practice director or an office manager, But I think there's value in that concept for all of us within the practice, because it does get easy. You know, dental professionals in general are typically pretty perfectionistic. We want it all to go well. We need it all to go right. We're treating people, you know, in a medical manner, like it's got to all, you know, work well. But I think all of us probably could carry through. All of us could probably carry through and look around for the good and you know, the positive that's happening, because the danger there is, if we're not careful, for somebody who really has an interest and is trying and growing, we could stifle that. You know, you're resilient enough to where you're like, okay, you know, that seems crazy and I'm going to carry this forward. But for some people who maybe haven't put themselves out there yet, it's important to just keep in mind, like, hey, you don't want to stifle that. If you see somebody that's stepping forward in growth or opportunity or trying to support their team, support that. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah. And thanks for pausing me there, because I will say, even at that time, I did not aspire to be an office manager in any way, shape, or form. Again, so I was introverted. I also believed at that time that I wasn't a leader. There's no way I could be a leader. I had trouble getting enough guts to even speak up in huddles. I mean, when it was my turn to actually run a huddle, I like didn't even sleep the night before. I would like get teary-eyed and a shaky voice thing, you know, if I would speak and it was in front of 7 people. And really what that came from was not that I didn't have the skill set. It was just, I was so self-conscious and so hard on the judgment of myself that going up there, I kind of felt like now I'm on the spotlight and they're going to see the real me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wasn't proud of it.
Got it.
At that time.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to keep checking my mascara as I start to look like Marilyn Manson here. You know, so yeah, and I think that it's also worth taking, you know, a self audit of why it is that we have those emotions. And so again, it wasn't like my excuse is I'm an introvert and therefore I couldn't. No, it was, I was so afraid of having people judge me. And I didn't want to be that person that I wanted to hide.
Right.
You know? So it took a lot to break through that. And I had people, fortunately, you know, in my life and some at the practice that really helped me with that. Dr. Craig, one of them, and Susie. She was our clinical team lead for many years until she moved to South Carolina. And so I think it's important that within that lesson that I learned is, regardless of where people want to go in their careers and in their lives, you know, I want to help them as much as I can to help them get there, even if that's not within the practice, you know, like the life changes, like circumstances change. And the more that we help other people, the more they help us in return with the time that they have within that practice. And so I would much rather have somebody highly, highly engaged for 6 months because they're going on to hygiene school or they're going on somewhere else than I would that somebody's limping along for 10 years, you know, and just kind of like disengage or actively disengage. And, but also a little bit of it too is because when I started to realize that mindset and what I was doing to myself, you know, I would kind of gravitate towards the people that were struggling the most, because I said, you know, I want them to know I have their back. Like, I want them to know that they have somebody here that believes in them. Because a lot of times, like, that's all that it takes is like for one person to say, you have potential, or I believe in you, to help somebody get out of that mindset, to say, I am worthy of somebody believing in me.
Yes.
So yeah, tears. I should have got the tissues out. But so fast forward to being a dental assistant. I was Dr. Miles Spodek's assistant. Then I had my son. So I went on maternity leave, and beforehand, you know, we brought somebody on board and I trained her to be Dr. Miles' assistant. And I trained her so well, I replaced myself. Okay. Which is honestly like the ultimate goal. I want to say again, in a typical dental practice, sometimes we fear that somebody's going to come in and be better than us and replace us. But ultimately, if you are a leader, or if you're aspiring to be one, or, having people being better around you actually makes you better. Like, you have to step up your game. They are going to influence and kind of put the pressure on you to say, these people are doing great things. Let me figure out how I can also continue to do great things. Like, we don't want to stifle people in the practice so that we are the only great people, because then you get into the situation where you can't go on vacation, you can't enjoy the time off that you have, because you are literally the only person in the practice that is capable to handle the things that are going on. And it just doesn't give you long-term success, and you can't amplify that, So if you're somebody that's wanting to take on a higher role, or maybe additional practices, or, new areas of growing in that department, growth does not happen with one person. It doesn't happen. It's not sustainable. So that was something else. It's like, you have to bring people on board. You have to help them be the best version of themselves. And through the process, you become your best version of yourself. So I became Dr. Craig Spodek's primary dental assistant. At that time, he was like so super scary to work with, because he was the owner, of the practice. And I think that it was like, if I messed up, I would be like, there goes my raise. I would be like, he had the authority to affect that. He had the authority to hire, to fire, how much you made, and all those things. So it was like even scarier working for him, because then again, I was like, oh my gosh, he may know of me. I'm a dental assistant, but now he knows my worth because I'm working with him. And what if he thinks I'm not worth what he's always known me to be, And so that was just super scary and intimidating going in there. And some of the best advice that I had gotten from one of the assistants there is that she says, typically dental assistants are supportive roles, right? We do what we're told to do. We are followers. That is it. We suction and we clean up the rooms and we set up, and that's our role. She goes, but what's different here, and what will help you and help you get to that worthiness with Dr. Craig, is that he wants you to be more than that. He wants you to think as if you were the doctor, as if you were a co-provider. He wants to know that you have his back and that you understand what's going on. He gets nervous when he's around nervous people. Like, he just feeds off of that energy. And so she goes, you go in there, you tell him what we're doing. Don't have him tell you what to do. You do it. And so I'm like, okay, I got to figure out what that looks like. So I would get to work early, and I would work with the main dental assistant. And I would say, okay, here's my schedule for tomorrow. Here's what I'm thinking we have to do. What am I missing? Like, what is the process? If we did big cosmetic cases, right? What's the staging? When do I bring the lab in? What's the articulation? Like, how do we maintain the vertical? All these other different things. And so I would come in and I would have my list written down off to the side. And so we would sit down and he would get started. And I said, oh, wait, we got to take our pre-op vertical measurement. And he's like, oh yeah, shit, that was good. This. And then so he'd be like, okay, we're done for the day. I'm like, oh, wait, no, we need the shade for the lab. Okay, great. And so then he started having more ease that I understood, listen, you don't have to remember everything. You don't have to know everything. You have somebody that's on your team that's co-collaborating that says, I've got your back. I understand what's happening. I want the best for the patient, just like you do. And I'm going to make sure that we are dismissing that patient when we are actually done. And so that's when those things turned around for that. Is just, I started thinking differently. I started taking that lead. And so for assistants, we can. And a lot of times for the ones that are like the best are the ones that anticipate that next move, because they're thinking like the doctor, they're not thinking like the assistant. So that would be my advice there. Start thinking like the doctor, anticipate as if you were in that position, and now you can become a mind reader.
Yes. Well, and I think, you know, we have something that we do. We have a phrase that we use at Atlanta Dental Spa from our hygiene team perspective is we try to set the doctor up so that when they come in for their exam, they just bobblehead like, yep, everything they said. So it's that same mindset of setting up, anticipating, knowing what the doctor is going to be talking about, going ahead and educating the patient, showing them everything that's going on. And it's that beautiful team collaboration work. And the patients feel that. The patients feel it if there's separation or there's stress or there's tension. Patients come to us because they want to be taken care of. So if we collectively as a team are hitting all cylinders and supporting one another and working together, that's where the beauty comes in. And they really do feel taken care of and supported.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. You know, part of my journey and, you know, evolving into being, you know, the office manager at Spodak, when I went to Dr. Craig and told him that that was a position that I wanted, it was not office manager. Okay. So I didn't ask for that. That's what I got, but that's not what I asked for. I actually was like, hey, I think that there's a need for somebody to bridge the gap between front versus back. You know, what is the coordination? And as we were growing larger and larger and larger as a team, like it was almost like two separate teams. We had two silos happening. Front was doing their things independently of back. And so I said, I kind of feel like we need like a quarterback, you know, somebody that can kind of then see everything from that, you know, 100-foot view and say, here's how everything is coordinated together. This is the common purpose. This is the common goal. So operations. And in my mind, what operations meant was strategic planning, communication, you know, integration, those types of things, not discipline, compliance, you know, conflict resolution, all the emotional like stuff that, you know, that comes along with that. I wasn't expecting it, but I got it. Anyways, and that was actually really, really challenging for me in the beginning, becoming, you know, new office manager. My personality by default, I do not like conflict and I do not like confrontation.
You and me both.
No. So now I'm put in this position where it's like, I have to keep my team accountable to following the rules. Like that is the epitome of like confrontation, you know, like I had to do it every day, like multiple times a day. So you can imagine like early on, like oh my gosh, my stomach was just in knots, like constantly. I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have this conversation with this person. You know, it was transformative for me in those moments is that what I've learned, people just like to know how to win. Yes. Right. And so the reason why we have rules and put into place and some of those rules is because we know that if you go against what the strategy is, that it brings us further away from what our mission is. And so if someone's breaking the rules, if the rule is a valid rule, you know, it can actually harm them or their opportunity or the patient or the practice. And so I had to look at it differently. This isn't personal. I'm not coming to you to correct something because you're a bad person. Right. I'm coming to correct you because I believe in you and I want you to get to your career goals. And in order to get there, you have to tweak a couple things. And so I just had to shift my mindset around what that was. And I think people will always believe and feel the energy that you're giving off in the room more so than the actual words that you're saying. I think oftentimes I get questions that are like, what do you say to somebody when you have to correct them? And I'm like, it's not about what you say, it's how you say it and what you mean behind it. So if I'm correcting somebody and I say something, but like I'm mad at them for breaking the rules, right? They're gonna feel like they let me down, they're in trouble, you know, whatever this happens to be. And that's really not the result that we're trying to get to. You know, the result is that we're trying to get to, hey, maybe they did something that compromised their safety and they got lucky that time. So, you know, the energy that I have around that is more of like, hey, you know, I want to make sure that I walk you through this process because I don't want to see you get hurt. That's so much more different than me being angry because they did something where they could have potentially chopped their finger off, you know?
Right.
Both like the same like type of essence of conversation. It's just the belief behind it. I want you to be safe versus you're a dumbass. And you get a very different result when you frame it that way.
Yeah, communication is so vital to everything we do all day long. And yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. You have to be very intentional with how you do that. And I think if you will keep it success focused and practice focused and self, protective focused, that goes a long way.
Yeah, for sure. With the evolution of that position. So I dentistry found me, started as a sterilization assistant, then became a dental assistant. Then I was a dental assistant team lead. And then now practice optimizer is the official title for, director of operations or office manager, whatever else title we want to name that. And every reiteration of myself to get me to those levels, like I had to accept shedding that old me. But part of that acceptance is to admit that the things I was doing needed to change because they were wrong, right? A lot of times we resist change because it's hard psychologically to say I'm wrong. Like if you're married, like, all about that. Like, you don't want to be wrong, but changing is unconsciously or like subconsciously, you having to admit to say what I'm currently doing is wrong and I have to change it to be something different or to get something different.
Right.
And that's a hard concept, that you have to do and you have to shed. And so sometimes how I'll like kind of walk myself through this process when I hit like that wall or that moment where I'm like, I'm going to give up, or this isn't worth it, or, I've been working really, really hard, I'm not seeing results. As I have to say, it's persistence, perseverance, yes. But if I'm not where I want to be, it's probably because I haven't fully given up who I am and who I need to be. I didn't fully let go of the old me yet. And that's why I'm not there. So yeah, I know that went really super psychological and deep, but
no, I think that's a really good point, because what I was going to say is one of the things I really love about your story is that obviously a good bit of your barriers were self-imposed. And, some of the other limitations or boundaries were more set up by others. I know you haven't mentioned it, but I know from your story that when you first went to Dr. Craig and were like, hey, I'm kind of interested in being this liaison. And, he was like, no, not yet. Let's give it 5 years. So that was kind of a barrier put on you by somebody else, but you face two very different types of barriers and you clearly have overcome both. And I know you would probably say to me, my journey's not over yet, because none of ours are. We never arrive. It's always a work in progress. But did your strategies look different for those two aspects? And did you find any like dovetailing where what you did for one thing addressed the other, or what have you found for that?
Yeah. So the internal stuff, that was a lot of me being okay with understanding I had flaws and I had to work on me. So I did a lot of reading. I love to read. And, so I love to go to Barnes and Noble, but now that I have a family and kids and all these, really work demands in life, I actually do audiobooks on my commute to and from work.
Yep.
I am the type of person that's like, hey, if that barrier comes in my way, well, I'm going to keep trying to figure out, do I hop it? Is there a fence? Can I go around it? What am I going to do to try to make sure that this barrier, like, no one should ever tell you what you are allowed to achieve. Period. The end.
Yes.
Don't let someone choose your life for you. And so when you do get those external forces that come in, don't allow that person to make that choice for you. It's not theirs to make. So the internal stuff, yes, I learned on, how to better communicate. One of the books that I love by John Maxwell, it's called Great Leaders Ask Great Questions. And that's beautiful because it really helps you in the psychology, drop the assumptions, drop the judgments of your team or the situation so that you can actually get to the root of the problem or or get to a better solution in a more elegant and graceful way. So that was one of those. Understanding business, I did a lot of reading books on that. Patrick Bet-David is great for business resources. Really love his stuff. Simon Sinek is really great for leadership type readings. John Maxwell has a ton, so even more books beyond the one that I named there. And then obviously, I mean, the Bulletproof podcast, the Hygiene podcast, like these are all great resources. It touches on all of those different subjects. So the external ones were different, and the strategy is different, especially if you have somebody that's above you, or say in this instance, the practice owner that was like, my foot is down, it's my practice, you're the employee, and that's what it is. That is a harder one to navigate. And so, yes, I was upset in that moment. I did feel defeat. And as I kind of stewed on that night, into that evening, I kind of had like my own aha moment. And that was, okay, well, what if he said yes to my request? What would I be doing differently walking into the doors that next morning? And so I realized, I'm like, wow, honestly, if I walked into those doors next morning, I would be doing the exact same thing. I don't even know what this would look like. And so I now had a new set of like, this is what I need to get done, or this is what I need to learn in order to get to this next level, because I really wasn't ready. And so it took me 3 years to get to that point. Also, leadership is, it's not a position, it's not a title. It's just it's who you are. And so when you're trying to affect change, you can do that regardless of having an official position or a title. So that was why I wanted it. I just wanted things to change for the better. I wasn't looking for the authority to make a decision to let someone go, or to say, you have to follow the rules because it's me and I get to tell you what to do. It's no, I am here to add value to the practice, to add value to you, so that we can get to our ultimate goal and the results, which is to take the very best care of the patient. And so I just started doing some of those things that I thought would help and add value. Because who can say no to that? Like if I'm saying, hey, let's do more Invisalign cases, let's do more Candid cases, let's do whatever it is, I want to generate more revenue for the practice. Why would he say no?
Right.
So yeah, I think that if you don't have the official title or position, so what? You get the title and the position by being the leader first, by showing your results first. Then that comes after it. And so yeah, that would be my advice, is just to kind of continue as if you owned it, or think about it. If I had it tomorrow, what would I need to do, or what would I need to know?
Yeah. So I love that. And I want to take it just a little bit further, because you get to direct the practice of how many team members do you guys have in total?
We're close to 50 now.
Okay. Yeah. And I know you're kind of the go-to for all of that. So that's a lot to maneuver. And I know you do a lot of conversations, when team members come to you asking, sharing ideas and thoughts, and hey, could we do this? And so I think you're a great person to ask this question to, because again, like I said in the beginning, I think a lot of hygienists in your kind of average run of the mill practices do feel a little handcuffed about what they can say and what they can do. And, you said, the owner or the doctor's like, I'm just putting my foot down and we're not doing this. That's a really uncomfortable place to be, especially when you're passionate about what you do. So I would love if you could share a little advice with our listeners that are looking to have conversations aimed at bringing change. And from a hygiene perspective, more things like, hey, if we want to onboard something new, or set a new protocol, or, just discussing personal concerns or conflict, how to bring that, or even just wanting to, discuss a change in compensation, from your perspective, because we can see it so clearly from our perspective. And I know, and I hope that you're going to include the whole business mindset owner concept here, but where do you think, what advice do you give on how to come with those kind of requests and questions?
Yeah. So each request is a little different, but I think the principles are the same.
Yes.
So whatever it is that you're wanting to effectively change, why? That is the very, very, very first thing. I think a lot of times, most of us skip to the how and the what. So like if I'm coming and I'm saying, we need to do peri-protect. Okay, so I'm looking, we just need to add this procedure. And maybe the doctor owner, the reason why they're like, no, is because they're saying that's going to take work and I'm going to have to figure out how to do this and I'm going to create a code, so maybe the objection or the barrier, has nothing related to you or the thing you're wanting to add. They're just not understanding the why, or they're perceiving that they're going to have to now own integrating or incorporating this into the practice. And so very first thing is you have to have, hey, here's why I would like to change or to do these things. Here's how I am going to help integrate, incorporate, and include into the process. So you are now fully taking responsibility to say, I got this. Like, right. I want to make this happen. So I'm going to be on auto. You're an autopilot. I'm going to be the one here driving the plane. You also want to include, if it's applicable, like benefits to adding whatever it is, and include those. How is it benefiting the patients? How is it benefiting the team? How is it benefiting the practice? Let's take a look at that. When you talk about like bringing concerns to your doctor, and that's a little bit different. You have to drop the emotions that you have around the situation. Because when you come in with a negative heated energy, it will be met with negative heated energy. And so you have to come in and you have to say, okay, I just don't have enough information. And I just want to understand what's happening first, and then we can get to a solution. So I'm going to go to the doctor with a concern. The very first thing I'm going to say is, hey, I'm just curious. Can you walk me through the decision behind this? Can you talk me a little bit more why we're doing the things that we're doing? I just want to understand so that I can kind of help wrap my head around this, right? Then once they give you all the information, sometimes it was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that, problem solved. Or now that you know it, then you can say, I got it. Here's a couple solutions I have. So we never want to come in and drop a complaint and then leave, because it does nobody any good. And again, so negative energy in, negative energy out. Understand why, come prepared with solutions. You want to be a part of the problem solving. When it comes to compensation, so again, thinking like a business owner. So in our own lives, we are running our own households. That is our business, right? So we get income that comes in, that's our paycheck. And then we have expenses, gas, food, schooling, books, clothes, fun stuff, experiences. Now, the amount that we can spend on the expenses is directly dependent on the income. So again, separate business with your normal life, right? And we understand that concept, but for some reason, sometimes we walk into a business, we just think that it's like a money tree growing outside. It's all dependent on the income that you have coming in. And again, so if I have a certain amount of money coming in, I can't spend 100% of that money on just food, because then I don't have rent and water and all the other stuff that goes along with it. There's certain percentages that we can allocate that income to the expense. Same thing with the business. And I hope I'm not speaking super above anybody's heads in this moment, but with hygiene compensations in particular, what is it that you are collecting for the practice? Now we have production, we have collection. So production is the amount of money we say the procedures are costing. What the patient actually pays is the actual money that's hitting the bank. So production money is like almost like monopoly money. It's not real until it's collected. So what's hitting the bank? That's the money we can base our expenses on. So I would start, what are your collections? Get a handle on what your numbers are, because that's what the business owner is going to do. Before he reviews the compensation, he's going to take a look at the numbers, or she. And so what are your collections? And I would do, the more narrow the search, the less accurate it is. The more information that you have, the better the full picture that you're going to have. So if you do 1 month, right? Well, you could have a fantastic month or a really bad month. Right. What is like your 3-month run rate? Like, what is that average? That's going to give you a better idea of what you're doing and how you're performing overall. So I would come with that 3-month collection average. In dentistry, there is a range for hygiene compensation, and that could be anywhere between 25% to 33% of collections. Now, there's a big range, and the range is because it also depends on the equipment, the amenities that you have for the practice, the benefits the practices are providing to those team members, and so forth. So that percentage isn't straight compensation. That percentage is for the hygiene department and it functioning and running. So that's why there's that swing in that range. So you can take a look at it, and let's say for ease of numbers, $90 for a procedure is collected. Let's say 30% is that magic number. So $30 for that 90-minute appointment goes to the hygienist. Okay. So let's say 90-minute or $90 appointment, but we only collect 50, right? Because it was an insurance patient. If you're hourly, $30 still goes to the hygienist. So it throws that percentage kind of out of whack and out of wonk. So it's hard to conceptualize without writing it down.
Yeah.
But if I were going to go in and ask for like $1 or $2 more, I would just make sure that my collections are increasing proportionate to the amount that I'm asking in return. It has to be win-win. So if it can't just be good for me, it has to be good for the practice. And so you always go in and say, hey, the reason why I'm asking for more is because I'm adding more value. It isn't because I've sat in the same chair every day for the same year and I'm collecting the same. Why would you get paid more? Time does not equal more value. Results equals more value. So how are you better educating the patient? What is your procedure mix? What is your treatment acceptance? What is your ability to also close restorative cases? Like all of those things can help you successfully negotiate more money because the practice is making more.
Yes.
So that's kind of the spirit behind
that. And that's beautiful. And I think, you know, especially new hygienists starting out, we don't always think of the big picture. You know, we look at our, you know, we may track our numbers and be like, oh, I'm doing really well. And, you know, I should get paid more. But we don't always have that business ownership mindset of thinking what the expenses are of the practice in general. And, you know, there's so many ways to look at it. But I think what you said is really valuable. And this is what I want to call our listeners to, because sometimes you hear everything you just said and you're like, oh my gosh, that sounds overwhelming, looking at all those numbers and thinking about all that. But you're right. I mean, if we're going to ask for increased value for ourselves, we have to be bringing increased value. So the challenge is for those listeners who maybe aren't really tracking their numbers and don't really know what case acceptance looks like and what their perio treatment percentage is and what their collections are looking like. This is an important time to start looking at that, because what I can guarantee you is if you start looking at that and paying attention to that, those numbers are going to come up. So don't hear this and get like, oh gosh, overwhelmed. I don't know how to do this. I don't want to look at all this. Dive in and start looking, because when you start paying attention, what we focus on is what grows. So if you're in that place of, hey, I'm really wanting to, ask for compensation, start tracking your numbers and looking at those. You will see them start to raise. You'll get more aware of what you're doing and more intentional about that. And it will benefit everyone across the board. Yeah, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and there's no harm in asking for help either. So
Yes.
Go to your office manager and say, hey, can you show me how to run these numbers? Or go to that practice owner, whoever is a part of determining the compensation, and say, what is it that you look for when you determine compensation increases? Now you know how to win, right? And I love that. If someone came to me and says, what do you look for when you're trying to determine to increase compensation? So then I can say, whatever those things are. And that person now says, now I have my marching orders, I'm going to do it. Yes. So we're not having to guess. And I think for anybody that isn't a hygienist, maybe there are practice leaders or practice owners listening, my advice would be, how well are you communicating to your team on how they can win? Do they even know how they can add value to the practice? Because the more they understand that, the more that they can then walk the walk, right? Because they know, like, here's the goalpost. I know exactly how to get there, and I can help the practice win and continue to grow.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, Erika, I just think that you have the most beautiful story of working your way from entry level to practice director. And I think that brings such a unique perspective that is just so valuable to us. And I feel like as we're having this conversation, I'm like, oh, we're going to have Erika back again soon, because I would love to pick your brain a little more about conflict resolution. You have just such a beautiful way of communicating through that. And I think that's something we all can constantly grow and learn in. So we're definitely going to have Erika back again. This has been really valuable to me today, and I'm so appreciative of your time, your passion for what you do, your expertise, and just this beautiful self-made woman you are. I would argue that you were worthy before any of this started, but you have definitely increased your value thousandfold with all that you've learned. And part of that to me is what's so beautiful is you are so open to growth. You know, like you said, you are open to change and realizing that, hey, what I was doing wasn't working. Let's change that. And I just think, you know, there's a lot of room for that in the world these days. So thank you for being the leader on that front. And thank you for spending your time with us today. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. And you know what? When I'm on next time, I will wear waterproof mascara. I was thinking that.
I love it. You make a beautiful Marilyn Manson. I mean, come on.
I mean, okay. Hey, I'll take it.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening this week. And, you know, if you have any questions about anything else, please don't hesitate to reach out on our Mighty Network. It's a free app you download on your phone and just search Bulletproof Hygiene. I've got good connections with Erika. So if you have questions, we can get you connected to her. But everybody have a great week, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.